Time slowed as the scalding coffee left the ceramic mug. Droplets hung suspended in the afternoon light streaming through Azure's tall windows. For a heartbeat, Marcus Wolfe Davidson saw the liquid airborne dark and menacing before it splashed across his weathered face. The restaurant fell silent. 60 pairs of eyes watched as coffee dripped from Wolfe's silver beard onto his treasured leather cut, soaking the patches that told the story of his service. Alexander Chase stood with an empty mug in his manicured hand, his $1,000 suit unwrinkled, his face twisted in a smile of pure contempt. "Now you smell better," Chase announced to the silent room, his voice carrying the refined accent of old Boston money. "Animals like you don't belong in establishments like this." Wolfe felt the coffee burn his skin. He felt the eyes of his brothers from the Iron Patriots Motorcycle Club watching, waiting for his signal. Most of all, he felt the gaze of his daughter Hannah, standing frozen in her best dress, witnessing everything. Wolfe did not raise his fists. He did not shout. He simply locked eyes with Chase and spoke two words that would change both their lives forever. "Rex, thunderclap." The wealthy businessman had just thrown hot coffee on a biker's face and laughed. 20 minutes later, he would be begging for mercy. Marcus Wolfe Davidson adjusted his leather cut in the mirror of his modest Dorchester home. At 65, his 6'3" frame remained imposing, though the decades had painted silver through his once dark beard. He ran calloused fingers over the patches adorning his leather 82nd Airborne Special Forces Afghanistan-Iraq. Each told a chapter of his story. The patch that meant the most sat over his heart, the Iron Patriots Motorcycle Club emblem, a bald eagle clutching a flag and rifle. Wolfe had founded the club in 1986 in the waning years of the Cold War, when he'd seen too many brothers in arms cast aside by the country they'd served. Today was special. His daughter Hannah was getting engaged. Wolfe smiled at the thought. She'd beaten the odds growing up without a mother after cancer took Elaine 10 years ago. Now Hannah was a doctor specializing in PTSD treatment at the Boston Veterans Medical Center, following in her mother's footsteps as a healer, but choosing to heal minds rather than bodies. His phone vibrated. "Rex calling." "We still on for 5?" Rex asked. His voice carried the slight drawl of his Georgia upbringing despite 30 years in Boston. "Wouldn't miss it, brother," Wolfe replied. "Hannah's been waiting for this day for months." Rex Holloway had been with the Iron Patriots from the beginning. They'd served together in Desert Storm, where Rex had lost his right leg below the knee. Now with a state-of-the-art prosthetic and a lifetime of stubborn defiance, Rex rode his Harley, as well as any man with 2 flesh and blood legs. "The boys are all cleaned up," Rex said. "Even Tank showered and found a tie." Wolfe chuckled. Tank Johnson, a mountain of a man who'd earned his nickname hauling a 50 caliber machine gun through the mountains of Afghanistan, owned exactly one tie. He wore it to weddings, funerals, and court appearances. "We'll make quite the impression at Azure," Wolfe said. Azure was Boston's most exclusive restaurant. Wolfe had never set foot inside, but Michael Hannah's fiancée came from a family that dined at such establishments regularly. The reservation had been made months ago with a substantial deposit to secure the best table. "Just remember," Rex said, his voice lowering, "best behavior tonight. This is for Hannah." "I know," Wolfe replied. "No club business. Just a father watching his little girl get engaged." After hanging up, Wolfe walked to his garage. Inside sat his pride and joy, a meticulously maintained 1985 Harley-Davidson Electra Glide. The machine gleamed under the garage lights, its chrome polished to mirror finish. He'd bought it after returning from Desert Storm, when the nightmares were at their worst. The open road had been his therapy long before therapists understood what combat did to a man's mind. He was about to mount the bike when his phone rang again. Unknown number. "Davidson," he answered. "Sir, this is Boston Veterans Medical Center." The voice was solemn, professional. "I'm calling about Sergeant James Miller." Wolfe felt his stomach tighten. Miller was one of theirs, Iraq veteran, 2 Purple Hearts, struggling with PTSD since his return in 2007. The Iron Patriots had been helping him through a rough patch. "What happened?" Wolfe asked, though he already knew. "I'm sorry to inform you that Sergeant Miller took his own life last night. He left a letter addressed to you." The world slowed. Another one lost? The war claiming casualties years after the last shots were fired. "I'll be right there," Wolfe said. Across town in the gleaming glass tower of Chase Global Headquarters, Alexander Chase stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of his corner office, surveying the city that his family had helped build. At 63, Chase carried himself with the confidence of a man who had never known failure. His tailored Tom Ford suit cost more than many people made in a month, his Patek Philippe watch worth more than some homes. On his mahogany desk, a family heirloom dating back 3 generations sat photographs in sterling silver frames. Chase at Harvard graduation. Chase breaking ground on his first major development. Chase shaking hands with 2 former presidents. Conspicuously absent was any photo of Thomas Chase, his younger brother by 5 years. Chase turned as his assistant knocked on the doorframe. "Your 4 o'clock canceled," she informed him, "and the board is asking about the Veterans Center acquisition." Chase waved dismissively. "Tell the board it's proceeding as planned. We'll announce next quarter after we've secured all the permits." The Veterans Center acquisition had been controversial. The facility in South Boston had been providing services to veterans for decades but sat on prime real estate. Chase Global had quietly purchased the property through a series of shell companies, planning to convert it into luxury condominiums. The PR team was already preparing the spin for the inevitable backlash. When his assistant left, Chase walked to a small bar tucked into custom bookshelves. He poured himself 2 fingers of 30-year-old Macallan, a ritual before any important evening. Tonight, he would be dining at Azure with potential investors from Dubai, men with billions to invest in Boston's changing skyline. His eyes drifted to a drawer he rarely opened. After a moment's hesitation, he pulled it out. Inside lay a single item, an old Sony Walkman cassette player, still containing the last tape his brother had given him before deploying to Iraq in 1991. Thomas had been the idealist of the family. While Alexander pursued wealth at Harvard Business School, Thomas had enlisted believing it his duty to serve during Desert Storm. The decision had created a rift between them, widened by their father's approval of Thomas's choice. Chase closed the drawer without removing the Walkman. Some memories were best left buried. His phone chimed with a text from his driver. The car was waiting. Chase straightened his already perfect tie, took one last look at the city he was reshaping, and headed for the elevator. The drive to Azure took 20 minutes in Boston's evening traffic. Chase barely noticed the city passing by his tinted windows, his mind occupied with the evening's business negotiations. The Dubai investors represented potential billions in foreign capital money that would cement Chase Global's dominance in Boston's real estate market for the next decade. He arrived at Azure precisely on time, as was his custom. The restaurant occupied the top floor of a renovated historic building offering panoramic views of Boston Harbor. The maitre d' greeted him by name, escorting him past tables of the city's elite to his usual spot by the windows. "Your guests will arrive in 30 minutes, Mr. Chase," the maitre d' informed him. "Would you care for a drink while waiting?" "The usual," Chase replied. As the perfect Manhattan appeared before him, Chase surveyed the restaurant. Every table was filled with Boston's power players, politicians, financiers, old money families. This was his natural habitat. His attention was drawn to the maitre d', speaking with apparent agitation into a phone at the reception desk. Unusual for Azure's typically flawless service. Chase thought nothing more of it until the manager appeared at his table 15 minutes later. "Mr. Chase," the manager began, clearly uncomfortable, "I must inform you that we have a situation with another reservation this evening." Chase raised an eyebrow. "How does this concern me?" "The Thompson Party of 6 has reserved our other premier table," the manager explained, gesturing to a table on the opposite side of the restaurant. "But there seems to be a complication with the guests." "What complication?" Chase asked, his irritation growing. The manager lowered his voice. "The reservation was made by a Dr. Whitaker for his son's engagement dinner. But the other family appears to be," he searched for a diplomatic term, "unconventional." Chase was about to dismiss the manager when the restaurant's atmosphere noticeably shifted. Heads turned toward the entrance where 6 figures had appeared. Even from across the restaurant, Chase could see they didn't belong. 6 men in leather motorcycle cuts over button-up shirts, their faces weathered by age and experience. Leading them was a tall, imposing man with a silver beard and the bearing of someone accustomed to command. Chase felt a flash of memory, his brother Thomas in his desert camouflage, standing tall before deployment. He pushed the thought away and turned to the manager. "This is unacceptable," he said coldly. "Azure has standards." The manager wrung his hands. "The reservation is legitimate, Mr. Chase. Dr. Whitaker is a valued patron, and his son is getting engaged tonight." To someone connected to those people, Chase couldn't hide his disgust. Before the manager could respond, Chase stood. "I'll handle this myself." Wolf felt the stares as he led his brothers into Azure. Rex walked beside him, his prosthetic leg hidden beneath dress pants. Behind them came Tank Hammer Scalpel and Poet, each man a veteran, each bearing visible and invisible scars from their service. The hostess had reacted predictably. First shock, then barely disguised disdain. "I believe you're lost, gentlemen," she had said with practiced politeness that didn't reach her eyes. "Davidson party of 6, Wolf had replied calmly. "We have a reservation." She had checked her computer, frowning at the confirmation. There must be some mistake. "No mistake," Rex had interjected. "Reservation made by Dr. Michael Whitaker. This is his fiance's family." Now as they followed the reluctant hostess through the restaurant, Wolf maintained perfect posture, his face impassive despite the stares and whispers. This was for Hannah. He would endure any discomfort for her happiness. Hannah had texted that she and Michael were running 15 minutes late. They were shown to their table, a prime location overlooking the harbor. Wolf noted the strategic positioning of their table, far from the restaurant's other elite patrons. "Your server will be with you shortly," the hostess said curtly before departing. "Friendly place," Tank muttered, his massive frame making the expensive chair look like doll furniture. "Best behavior," Wolf reminded them quietly. "This is Hannah's night." Scalpel, a former combat medic named for his precision under pressure, adjusted his collar. "Anyone else notice the suits at 3 o'clock? Giving us the stink eye." Wolf didn't need to look. He had clocked every person in the restaurant upon entering old habits from decades of situational awareness training. The man at 3 o'clock had been staring since they walked in. Expensive suit, authoritative posture, eyes cold with judgment. "Ignore him," Wolf said. "Focus on why we're here." But the man had other plans. Wolf watched from his peripheral vision as the suit stood and began walking toward their table, his gait betraying absolute confidence. Incoming, a poet warned unnecessarily. Poet had earned his nickname writing verse in the mountains of Afghanistan between combat patrols. His words had kept many men sane during the darkest days. The suit stopped at their table, looking down at them with undisguised contempt. A larger man, clearly security, stood several paces behind him. "Gentlemen," the suit said, though his tone carried no courtesy, "I believe you're contaminating my air." Wolf measured his response carefully. "We're just here for dinner." "Not in my restaurant," the suit replied. Rex raised an eyebrow. "You own this place." The suit smiled coldly. "I own the building and the bank that holds its loan." Now Wolf turned to fully face the man. Something about him seemed vaguely familiar, though Wolf was certain they had never met. "I'm Alexander Chase," the man said, as if the name alone should inspire deference. "And Azure has certain standards." The name registered immediately. Chase Global, the company buying up veteran housing across the city. The name that appeared on documents denying funding for PTSD research at Hannah's hospital. "We have a legitimate reservation," Wolf stated calmly. "We're here for my daughter's engagement dinner." Chase looked them over with theatrical disgust. "Look at you animals. Probably dealing drugs and terrorizing decent people when you're not playing dress-up for dinner." Wolf's jaw tightened, but his voice remained measured. "Sir, we're veterans here for a family celebration. I'd appreciate if you'd return to your table." "I don't care if you're the Joint Chiefs," Chase said, stepping closer. "Trash doesn't eat where I eat." Tank shifted, his massive frame tensing. Wolf gave him a subtle hand signal to stand down. The confrontation was interrupted by a familiar voice. "Dad, what's happening?" Wolf turned to see Hannah approaching in her navy blue dress, her expression shifting from joy to concern. Michael Whitaker stood beside her, looking mortified. "Hannah," Wolf said, his voice softening instantly, "you look beautiful." Chase's eyes moved to Hannah, assessing her with naked appraisal that made Wolf's protective instincts flare. "This pretty thing is your daughter." The way he said it carried insinuation that tightened Wolf's fists at his sides. "Must have gotten her looks from her mother," Chase leered. "Certainly not from you animals." Hannah stepped forward, her professional demeanor taking over. "I'm Dr. Hannah Davidson, and you are—" "Alexander Chase," he replied, suddenly affecting charm. "Your father and his friends were just leaving." "We have a reservation," Hannah said firmly. "My fiance's family made it months ago." Chase glanced at Michael, recognition dawning. "Whitaker, as in Dr. James Whitaker's son." His tone changed slightly, recognizing a name with social standing. Michael nodded uncomfortably. "Yes, sir. My father sends his regrets. He was called into emergency surgery." "What a shame," Chase said, not sounding sorry at all. "I know your father, excellent cardiac surgeon, though I question his son's judgment and associations." The implied insult hung in the air. Wolf stood slowly, his full height imposing even to Chase. Mr. Chase, I'm going to ask you politely to leave our family alone and return to your table. Chase's face hardened. Or what? You'll beat me up. Prove you're the animals I know you are. Before anyone could respond, Chase reached for his coffee cup on a nearby service station. In one fluid motion, he threw the contents directly into Wolf's face. Hot liquid splashed across Wolf's features, dripping down his beard onto his treasured leather cut. The patches that told his life story, Special Forces 82nd Airborne Combat decorations soaked through with dark coffee. There, Chase announced loudly, I just improved your smell. The restaurant held its breath. Every patron, every server frozen in place, waiting for the inevitable violence. For a split second, even Wolf's iron control wavered as decades of combat training screamed for response. Hannah gasped. Michael stood paralyzed. The Iron Patriots tensed ready for Wolf's signal. Instead, Wolf smiled dangerously. Rex, he said quietly, Operation Thunderclap. Rex nodded once and reached for his phone. Chase laughed. Calling more biker trash, I'll have you all arrested. Wolf locked eyes with a businessman. No, Mr. Chase, I'm calling justice. An hour earlier, Wolf had stood in the sterile hallway of Boston Veterans Medical Center, holding Sergeant James Miller's last letter in trembling hands. Miller had been 36 years old, 2 tours in Iraq, Bronze Star with Valor, a wife and 2 children, and now another statistic in the epidemic of veteran suicides. The letter was written in Miller's precise handwriting. Wolf, I tried everything. The VA waitlisted me again. The nightmares won't stop. Last week I went to that new clinic funded by Chase Global that promised cutting-edge PTSD treatment. They turned me away, said my benefits didn't qualify. I begged them, told them what was happening in my head. The administrator told me that budget constraints meant they could only accept certain cases. Then I saw the news that the same company is buying our treatment center to build luxury condos. I'm tired, Wolf. Too tired to fight anymore. Please tell my kids I wasn't weak. I just couldn't find the way home from the war. Take care of my family. They'll need the Iron Patriots now. Semper Fi, Miller. Enclosed with the letter was a photograph creased and worn showing Miller in desert camouflage, standing beside another soldier. Written on the back, Miller in Chase, Iraq, 1991. Chase, the same last name as the company denying care to veterans. Wolf had stared at the second soldier in the photo. Young, idealistic eyes, a face that carried a vague resemblance to someone Wolf had seen before. Now as he wiped coffee from his face in Azure's immaculate restroom, Wolf studied his reflection. 65 years old, 3 decades of military service, another 2 decades running the Iron Patriots, helping veterans navigate civilian life. He had long ago stopped believing in coincidences. Taking out his phone, Wolf compared the old photograph with the face of Alexander Chase from the Chase Global website. The businessman was not the soldier in the photo, but the resemblance was unmistakable, same jawline, same eyes. Brothers almost certainly. Wolf typed a name into his phone, Thomas Chase. The search results confirmed his suspicion. Thomas Chase, younger brother of Alexander Chase, had served in the Army during Desert Storm. He had died in 2005 suicide. The pieces connected. Miller and Thomas Chase had served together. And now Miller had followed his battle buddy into death, denied care by Thomas's own brother's company. Wolf tucked the photo away and straightened his leather cut. The coffee had soaked through to his skin, but the burn was nothing compared to what he'd endured before. He had promised Hannah that tonight would be perfect for her. That promise was now broken through no fault of his own. But there was another promise, the one he made to every veteran who joined the Iron Patriots. No brother left behind, no injustice unanswered. Operation Thunderclap had been established in 1987 when a group of drunk college students had attacked a Vietnam veteran outside a bar near Fort Bragg. The local police had looked the other way. The Iron Patriots had not. Without violence, without breaking any laws, they had ensured justice was served. The world had changed since 1987. The tools at their disposal had expanded. Wolf returned to the dining room where tension hung thick in the air. Chase had returned to his table but was watching the Iron Patriots with smug satisfaction. Hannah was trying to salvage the evening, speaking in low tones with Michael. The other Patriots sat alert, waiting for Wolf's lead. It's happening, Rex said quietly, showing Wolf his phone screen, a map of Boston with dozens of blinking dots converging on their location. Each dot represented a motorcycle. Each motorcycle carried a veteran. How many? Wolf asked. 200 and counting, Rex replied. Every club within 50 miles is responding. They'll be here in 20 minutes. Wolf nodded. He turned to Hannah, whose eyes reflected hurt and anger at how their special night had been ruined. "I'm sorry, sweetheart," Wolf said softly. Hannah surprised him by taking his hand firmly. "You have nothing to apologize for, Dad." Michael cleared his throat. "Mr. Davidson, if you want to file charges for assault." Wolf shook his head. "That's not how we handle things." "How do you handle things?" Michael asked, a new respect evident in his voice. "With truth," Wolf replied, "the most powerful weapon ever created." Alexander Chase returned to his table feeling invigorated. Putting the biker trash in their place had been satisfying, a reminder of the natural order. Men like Chase built the world. Men like those bikers just lived in it. His phone vibrated. The Dubai investors were running late traffic from the airport. Chase ordered another Manhattan, watching with amusement as the bikers conferred at their table. The daughter was quite attractive, completely out of place among those roughnecks. Chase wondered what her story was. His phone vibrated again. Not the investors this time, but his assistant. "Sir, there's something you should see," she said without preamble. "You're trending on social media." "I'm what?" Chase asked, the unfamiliar term registering as something vaguely unpleasant. "Someone is live streaming from Azure. It shows you throwing coffee on a veteran. It's being shared thousands of times." Chase felt a flicker of unease. "That's ridiculous. Who would watch such nonsense?" "Sir, the veteran is Marcus Davidson. He's somewhat famous in military circles. Special forces, multiple combat decorations. He runs a nonprofit for veterans with PTSD." The unease grew stronger. "How many views are we talking about?" His assistant hesitated. "Over 50,000 in the last 10 minutes. It's being picked up by veteran groups nationwide." Chase ended the call, suddenly aware of other patrons glancing at their phones, then at him. He checked his own social media accounts. Notifications were flooding and most unprintable, all outraged. Outside Azure's windows, Chase noticed a motorcycle parking across the street. Then another, and another. Within minutes, dozens of bikes lined the street below their riders, gathering in ominous silence. Chase's phone vibrated again. His company's PR director. "Tell me this isn't you," the director demanded without greeting, sending a link to the livestream. Chase watched 5 seconds of the video himself throwing coffee, the veteran's dignified response. The comments scrolling beside the video were vitriolic. "This will blow over," Chase said with more confidence than he felt. "It's not blowing over," the PR director said. "It's getting worse. Do you know who that man is? His daughter runs the PTSD program that your company denied funding to last month. The same month we announced the Veterans Center acquisition." Now real concern began to penetrate Chase's confidence. "What are you suggesting?" "I'm not suggesting anything. I'm telling you that our stock is already down 3% in after-hours trading. The board chairman is trying to reach you, and there are now hundreds of motorcycles surrounding Azure." Chase looked out the window again. The PR director wasn't exaggerating. The street below was filling with motorcycles, their riders standing at attention, each holding a small American flag. His phone buzzed with a text from the Dubai investors. They were canceling dinner. Their representative had seen the video and advised against associating with Chase at this time. For the first time that evening, Alexander Chase felt the first tremors of his world shifting beneath his feet. Outside Azure, the Iron Patriots had orchestrated the most disciplined response in their club's history. 200 motorcycles arrived in formation, their riders parking in perfect rows. Veterans from every conflict since Korea stood shoulder to shoulder holding small American flags in silent vigil. Rex's live stream had surpassed 100,000 viewers. News vans were arriving, attracted by the spectacle of hundreds of bikers surrounding Boston's most exclusive restaurant. Inside, Wolf sat calmly with Hannah and Michael explaining the history of Operation Thunderclap. "It's about accountability," Wolf said, "not revenge." Michael was watching the gathering outside with astonishment. "I've never seen anything like this." Hannah squeezed her father's hand. "Those men down there, they all came for you." Wolf shook his head. "Not for me, for what's right, for Miller, for Thomas Chase." "Who?" Hannah asked. Wolf showed her the photograph. "Alexander Chase's brother. He served with Miller in Iraq. Both denied help by Chase's company, both dead by suicide." Hannah studied the photo, her doctor's mind making connections. "That's why you didn't hit him. You're after something bigger than one night's insult." "Justice doesn't come from fists," Wolf said. "It comes from truth exposed to light." Their conversation was interrupted as an elderly man approached their table. He walked with the slightly stiff gait of someone carrying old injuries, his bearing unmistakably military, despite his advanced age. "Excuse me," he said, respectfully. "Are you Marcus Davidson?" Wolf stood. I am. The man straightened perceptibly. Master Sergeant William Holloway, United States Army, retired. Korea, 1953. Wolf extended his hand. An honor, Master Sergeant. The older veteran shook it firmly. I saw what happened. That man has no idea who he insulted tonight. He gestured to his own table where an elderly woman watched anxiously. My wife and I have been coming to Azure for our anniversary for 15 years. I want you to know not everyone here shares that man's views. Wolf nodded his appreciation. Thank you for saying so. The Master Sergeant wasn't finished. I'm not the only one. He turned slightly and raised his voice. Veterans stand and be recognized. Throughout the restaurant, people began to stand. An elegant woman in her 70s, a distinguished man in a custom suit, a young waiter, a middle-aged chef emerging from the kitchen. One by one, they stood veterans or family of veterans scattered among Azure's elite clientele. I served in Desert Storm, the elegant woman said. Afghanistan 2010, the young waiter added. My son is in the Navy, another patron offered. Soon, nearly a third of the restaurant was standing. Not bikers, not stereotypical veterans, but ordinary Americans from all walks of life who had served their country. Alexander Chase watched this unfold from his table, his face draining of color as he realized how badly he had miscalculated. These weren't just biker trash, these were citizens he had insulted. Voters, customers, shareholders. His phone continued vibrating with the calls from the board, from investors, from partners, frantically trying to distance themselves from the unfolding PR disaster. Outside, the crowd of bikers had grown to fill the entire block, their silent vigil more powerful than any protest. News helicopters circled overhead, broadcasting the scene live across New England. Chase's security man leaned close. Sir, we should consider leaving through the kitchen. I'm not slinking out of the back door of a restaurant I practically own. Chase snapped, though his confident facade was crumbling. The restaurant manager approached Chase's table, sweating visibly. Mr. Chase, I need to speak with you. Handle those people, Chase ordered, gesturing toward the bikers outside. The manager straightened, finding unexpected resolve. Sir, I need to ask you to leave. Chase stared in disbelief. What I eat here every week. Not anymore, the manager said firmly. I've been instructed by the owner that you're no longer welcome at Azure. That's absurd, Chase sputtered. I own the building. But not the restaurant, the manager replied. And the owner feels your behavior violates our standards. Chase turned to his security man expecting support, but found the man stepping back. Sorry, Mr. Chase, the security man said, unpinning his earpiece. My brother's a Marine. I can't be part of this. He walked away, leaving Chase utterly alone at his table. The manager held out a cordless phone. The owner would like a word. Chase snatched the phone. Do you have any idea who I am? I'll buy this restaurant and fire everyone. The calm voice on the other end was familiar, James Whitaker Michael's father. One of Boston's most respected surgeons and apparently Azure's primary investor. Alexander, Dr. Whitaker said, I've known you for 20 years. Never thought I'd see you assault a veteran in public. A pause. That man is going to be my son's father-in-law. Chase felt the last of his control slipping away. James, this is all a misunderstanding. No misunderstanding, Dr. Whitaker replied. I watched the video. The whole board of Mass General has watched it. Your company's donation to our new wing is being returned in the morning. The call ended. Chase looked up to find Wolf Davidson standing before him, flanked by his Iron Patriots. Here's what happens now, Wolf said quietly, his voice carrying the authority of decades of command. Chase felt surrounded, though none of the bikers had laid a hand on him. Are you threatening me? No threats, Wolf replied. Just consequences. Rex held up his phone, showing the live stream that had now reached 500,000 viewers. Every biker in America is watching, Rex said. That's what Code Black means. You're live streaming this? Chase said, his face paling further. Freedom of the press, Wolf replied mildly. First Amendment. Chase's phone rang. He answered automatically. Mr. Chase, this is Channel 7 News. We're getting reports you assaulted a decorated veteran at Azure Restaurant. Would you care to comment? He hung up. The phone rang immediately. Boston Globe here. We're running a story on your company's denial of PTSD treatment to veterans while acquiring treatment facilities for luxury development. Any comment? Another call, his wife. Alexander, what have you done? Our neighbors just called. It's all over the news. More calls, business partners, country club members, the board chairman. Chase looked up at Wolf with dawning horror. Make it stop. Wolf shook his head slightly. Can't stop the internet, Mr. Chase. Through the windows, Chase could see the bikers standing in perfect formation. News cameras captured everything. But what truly unnerved him was their silence. Hundreds of men and women, many in military formation, holding American flags without a word. The image was spreading across social media faster than any PR team could contain. "This is extortion," Chase said desperately. "This is consequences," Wolf corrected. Hannah stepped forward. "Mr. Chase, my father served 3 tours in Afghanistan. Rex lost his leg in Iraq." She continued, gesturing to each Iron Patriot in turn. "Tank pulled wounded Marines from a burning Humvee in Fallujah. Scalpel performed field surgery under enemy fire. Poet carried wounded men through the mountains when the medevac couldn't land." She fixed Chase with the steady gaze of a doctor who had seen human suffering in its rawest forms. "These aren't animals, Mr. Chase. They're heroes you just publicly humiliated." Chase's phone rang again, the board chairman personally. The shouting was audible to everyone nearby. "You're suspended effective immediately," the chairman roared. "The board is convening an emergency session. You've destroyed our reputation in a single evening." Chase let the phone drop to the table, watching as decades of carefully cultivated power and influence crumbled in real time. "Please," he begged Wolf, "make it stop." Wolf studied the broken man before him. "Apologize," he said simply. Chase's pride warred with his desperation. Outside, 200 bikers waited patiently. Inside, dozens of patrons watched the drama unfold. Around the world, millions were now viewing the live stream. Finally, Chase broke. "I'm sorry," he mumbled. "Louder," Wolf commanded. "I'm sorry for insulting veterans," Chase said, his voice breaking. "And," Rex prompted. "And for throwing my drink." "And," Tank added. "And for calling you animals." Wolf nodded to the window. The bikers outside began dispersing one by one, each placing their small American flag in a growing pile before the restaurant. The live stream ended, but the damage was done. The video had 10 million views and counting. Chase's face would become synonymous with his moment of cruelty, replayed endlessly online. Wolf turned to Hannah and Michael. "I believe we still have an engagement to celebrate." Azure's manager approached, still sweating but now deferential. "Dr. Davidson, Dr. Whitaker called. The entire meal is complimentary, and he's personally donating $10,000 to your veterans charity." Wolf nodded his thanks, then turned back to Chase. "You have a chance now, Mr. Chase. Not to save your reputation that's gone, but to make amends, to honor your brother's memory." Chase looked up, shocked. "How do you know about Thomas?" Wolf placed the old photograph on the table. "He served with honor. He deserved better from his country. He deserved better from his brother." As Chase stared at his brother's face in the faded photograph, Wolf leaned closer. "Thomas and Miller both reached out for help. Both were denied. Don't let it happen to anyone else." With those words, Wolf turned away, leaving Chase alone with the truth that had destroyed him. Not violence, not threats, just the unvarnished reality of who he was and what he had done, exposed for all to see. Hannah's engagement dinner proceeded in peace. The Iron Patriots raised glasses in toast to the young couple. News cameras captured it, all the bikers who had assembled without violence to defend a brother's honor, then celebrated a moment of joy with the same discipline and respect. Wolf kept his coffee-stained vest. When asked why he didn't clean it, he would say, "It reminds me that sometimes the best revenge isn't violence. It's letting a man destroy himself while the whole world watches." The photograph of Thomas Chase and Sergeant Miller was carefully placed in his pocket, next to his heart. 2 more brothers lost. 2 more reasons to keep fighting for those who survived. Outside Azure, as the last motorcycles departed, a pile of small American flags remained a silent testimony to the real heroes of the evening. Not the wealthy businessman with his name on buildings, but the men and women who had placed service above self-honor, above comfort. Brotherhood, above all. The morning after the confrontation at Azure, Boston, awoke to a changed landscape, not in its physical skyline dominated by Chase Global Towers, but in its social consciousness. Local news led with the story, "Boston Tycoon Humiliates Decorated Veteran." National outlets picked it up by noon. Viral video shows millionaires attack on biker veterans. By evening, the video had 30 million views worldwide. Alexander Chase sat alone in his penthouse, staring at the walls of windows that no longer felt like a vantage point, but a fishbowl. His phone had not stopped ringing until he finally turned it off. His email inbox overflowed with messages from the board, from business partners, from lawyers. The personal messages were worse. Old friends distancing themselves, social connections severed, invitations rescinded. The morning paper lay unopened on his marble countertop. He didn't need to read the headline to know what it said. His face would be there, captured in that moment of cruel superiority, as coffee flew toward Marcus Davidson's weathered features. A lifetime building Chase Global erased by 10 seconds of viral video. Across town in the modest headquarters of the Iron Patriots Motorcycle Club, a different scene unfolded. The converted warehouse in South Boston hummed with activity. Veterans from across New England had been arriving since dawn, drawn by the previous night's events. Some came on motorcycles, others in cars bearing military bumper stickers. They came not for vengeance, but for solidarity. Wolf sat at his desk in the small office overlooking the main floor. Before him lay the morning paper, his own face staring back at him dignified despite the coffee streaming down his beard. The headline read, "The Night We Won Without Fighting." Rex entered without knocking, their decades of friendship transcending formalities. "You've seen the news." Wolf nodded. "All of it." Chase Global stock dropped 15% at opening bell, Rex reported. Board of Directors has called an emergency meeting. Rumor is they're voting on his removal as CEO. Wolf's expression remained unreadable. This wasn't about destroying Chase. It was about justice for Thomas Chase, for Sergeant Miller, for all the veterans denied care by corporate greed. "How's Hannah taking it?" Rex asked. "Better than expected," Wolf replied. "She and Michael are meeting with his father today. Dr. Whitaker wants to fund her PTSD research program personally." Rex smiled. "Some good coming from the bad." Wolf's phone buzzed with a text from Hannah. "CNN wants an interview with you. So does Fox News. What should I tell them?" Wolf considered this carefully before replying, "Tell them I'm not interested in fame. This was never about me." Rex watched his old friend with knowing eyes. "The boys downstairs are calling you a legend, taking down a tycoon without throwing a punch." Wolf shook his head. "I didn't take him down. His own actions did." A knock at the door interrupted them. Tank filled the doorframe, his massive shoulders nearly touching both sides. "Boss, there's someone here to see you," Tank said. "Says he's from Chase Global." The Chase Global Tower stood 60 stories above Boston's financial district, its glass facade reflecting clouds and sky. Inside the boardroom on the top floor, tension thickened the air. 12 men and women in bespoke suits sat around a polished table worth more than most Americans earned in a year. Margaret Chen, board chairwoman, called the meeting to order. At 72, she had survived 3 market crashes and 2 corporate coups. Her voice carried the weight of billions in managed assets. "The situation is unprecedented," she began without preamble. "Our stock has fallen 17%. 3 major clients have suspended contracts. The veterans groups are organizing a nationwide boycott of any business housed in Chase Global Properties." Around the table, faces remained professionally impassive, but white knuckles and tapping fingers betrayed anxiety. "Where is Alexander?" asked Howard Brennan, the longest-serving board member beside Chen. "He was instructed not to attend," Chen replied. "His presence would only inflame tensions further." She nodded to her assistant, who distributed folders containing printed screenshots from social media. The images told a devastating story: Chase throwing coffee veterans with flags surrounding Azure side-by-side photos of Thomas Chase in uniform and Alexander in his CEO portrait. "The narrative has progressed beyond the initial incident," Chen continued. "Someone leaked Thomas Chase's military records and suicide note to the press. The story now involves Alexander denying funding to the very PTSD programs that might have saved his brother." Silence fell over the room. "Is it true?" Brennan finally asked. Chen's face tightened. "It appears so. Thomas Chase left a letter explaining how he begged his brother for help establishing a veterans treatment program. Alexander not only refused, but actively worked to dismantle existing programs that interfered with the development opportunities." James Peterson, the newest board member and the only veteran present, spoke next. "I served with men like Marcus Davidson. If he wanted revenge, he would have taken it differently. This man is after justice, not destruction." "The distinction is irrelevant," said William Morris, head of the Finance Committee. "Our stock is in free fall. Pension funds are divesting. We need to contain this immediately." Chen nodded. "Options. Fire Chase," Morris said immediately. "Announce a full investigation. Pledge substantial funding to veterans' causes." "Alexander founded this company," Brennan protested. "His name is on the building." "His name is now toxic," Morris countered. "We have fiduciary responsibility to shareholders." Peterson cleared his throat. "Perhaps there's another approach. What if we engage directly with Davidson, found out what he actually wants?" Chen considered this. Do you think he would negotiate? Men like Davidson don't think in terms of negotiation, Peterson replied. They think in terms of mission objectives. If his objective is justice for veterans rather than vengeance against Chase, there might be common ground. Chen made her decision. Peterson made contact. Find out what it would take to resolve this. The rest of you prepare for any outcome. If we must remove Alexander, we need a succession plan ready. As the board members filed out, Chen remained seated, staring at the photograph of Thomas Chase in desert camouflage. He had the same eyes as his brother, determined, intelligent. But where Alexander's eyes calculated advantage, Thomas's reflected idealism. Chen had known both brothers, had watched Alexander climb while Thomas served, had attended Thomas's funeral while Alexander closed a deal in Tokyo. She opened her desk drawer and removed an old newspaper clipping dated 2005. The small obituary for Thomas Chase mentioned his military service, but listed his death as sudden, the corporate euphemism for suicide. At the bottom in faded ink she had written, "We failed him." Chen picked up her phone and dialed a number she rarely used. "This is Margaret Chen. I need to speak with Marcus Davidson. Personally." The man from Chase Global sat awkwardly on the worn leather couch in Wolf's office. James Peterson wore his corporate suit like armor, but his posture betrayed military training. Wolf recognized it immediately. "Where did you serve?" Wolf asked, bypassing corporate pleasantries. Peterson straightened instinctively. "1st Infantry Division, Iraq, 2003-2004. Wolf nodded, professional respect established. "What can I do for Chase Global today, Mr. Peterson?" Peterson measured his words carefully. "I'm here on behalf of the board, not Alexander Chase. They want to understand your intentions." Wolf leaned back in his chair. "My intentions were never complicated. Justice for veterans denied care. Recognition of their sacrifice. Accountability from those who profit while we suffer. The board is prepared to make substantial changes," Peterson said, "but they need to know what would resolve this situation from your perspective." Wolf studied the man before him. Peterson wasn't just a corporate messenger. He was a brother in arms navigating the civilian world, balancing corporate responsibility with military values. "You've seen Thomas Chase's records," Wolf said. It wasn't a question. Peterson nodded. "This morning, along with Miller's letter." "Then you know this isn't about one man throwing coffee," Wolf replied. "It's about a pattern of decisions that cost lives. Thomas Chase, Sergeant Miller. How many others?" Peterson shifted uncomfortably. "The board is prepared to establish a foundation for veterans' mental health. Substantial funding. They're discussing numbers in the tens of millions." Wolf's expression hardened. "Money without understanding is just conscience washing. Alexander Chase didn't just deny funding. He actively dismantled programs his brother tried to build. He bought properties serving veterans to convert them into luxury developments." "The board wasn't aware of the personal connection," Peterson admitted. "Now they are," Wolf said. "The question is what they'll do with that knowledge." Peterson leaned forward. "What would you do if you were in their position?" Wolf considered this carefully. "3 things. First, preserve the veterans' facilities Chase Global has acquired, not just with funding, but with expansion. Second, establish a treatment center bearing Thomas Chase's name, specializing in PTSD care. Third," he paused, searching for words. "What's the third?" Peterson asked. "Accountability," Wolf said finally. "Not just from the company, but from Alexander Chase personally. He needs to understand what his actions cost. Not through public humiliation, he's had enough of that. Through direct engagement with the consequences." Peterson nodded slowly. "I'll convey your thoughts to the board." He rose to leave, but stopped at the door. "For what it's worth, many of us respect what you did, standing your ground without violence. That takes more courage than most civilians understand." After Peterson left, Rex entered. "Think they'll actually do any of it?" Wolf shrugged. "Doesn't matter. The world is watching now. Whatever they do will be measured against what they should do." Rex handed Wolf a tablet showing a news article. The headline read, "Exclusive Thomas Chase's Final Days Revealed." The article detailed how Thomas had struggled with PTSD after Desert Storm, how he had approached various veterans organizations with plans for treatment programs, how his own brother had blocked his efforts at every turn. "This is going to get worse for Chase before it gets better," Rex observed. Wolf frowned. "This wasn't part of Operation Thunderclap. We didn't leak Thomas's story." "No," Rex agreed, "but once you open Pandora's box, you can't control what flies out." Wolf set down the tablet, troubled by the escalation. Justice required truth, but truth wielded without compassion could become merely another weapon. His phone rang, unknown number. "Davidson," he answered. Mr. Davidson, this is Margaret Chen, chairwoman of Chase Global's board. I believe we need to talk. Alexander Chase had never felt so utterly alone. His spacious penthouse echoed with silence. His wife had taken their children to their summer home in the Berkshires, away from the media frenzy. His friends had stopped calling. Even his executive assistant had taken sudden personal leave. The television played silently in the background, occasionally showing his face in the endlessly repeated clip. He'd stopped watching the coverage but couldn't bring himself to turn it off completely. Self-flagellation, perhaps. A knock at his door startled him. Nobody was supposed to make it past the doorman without announcement. Chase approached cautiously and checked the peephole. Margaret Chen stood in the hallway, her diminutive figure belying the power she wielded. Chase opened the door. "Margaret, this is unexpected." "May I come in?" she asked, though her tone made it clear it wasn't really a question. Chase stepped aside. Chen entered, taking in the disarray of the normally immaculate apartment. Takeout containers, unwashed glasses, newspapers scattered across surfaces. "The board met this morning," Chen said without preamble. "I assumed as much," Chase replied. "Am I fired?" Chen didn't answer directly. "I knew your brother, Alexander." The statement hung in the air between them, heavier than any corporate pronouncement. "Thomas came to me in 2004, Chen continued. "He had plans for a comprehensive PTSD treatment program. He needed backing from Chase Global to secure matching government funds." Chase turned away. "Ancient history." "Not to the men and women still suffering," Chen countered. "Not to Sergeant Miller, who followed your brother into death last week." Chase flinched. "I never knew Miller. That connection is coincidental." "Is it?" Chen asked. "Or is it the natural outcome of systematic neglect, the same neglect that drove Thomas to take his life?" Chase's composure cracked. "You have no right to speak about Thomas." "I have every right," Chen said firmly. "I was there when he presented his proposal to the board. You were the one who shot it down, calling it charitable waste that would interfere with prime development opportunities." "That was business," Chase insisted. "Nothing personal." Chen's eyes flashed with rare anger. "It was personal to Thomas. It was personal to Miller. It's personal to Marcus Davidson and every veteran watching this story unfold." She placed a folder on the counter between them. "The board has made its decision. You're being placed on administrative leave pending further review." Chase had expected as much. "For how long?" "That depends," Chen replied. "Not on the board, but on you." She opened the folder, revealing a document with the Chase Global letterhead. "This authorizes the immediate establishment of the Thomas Chase Memorial Foundation for Veterans' Mental Health. Initial funding of $50 million. Preservation of all veterans' facilities currently owned by Chase Global Properties. And your personal involvement in its operations." Chase stared at the document. "My personal involvement." "Marcus Davidson believes that money without understanding is meaningless," Chen explained. "He wants you to see firsthand what your decisions have cost, not as punishment, but as education." Chase laughed bitterly. "Davidson wants me doing charity work as community service, checking boxes to get my company back." Chen's expression hardened. "No, Alexander, he wants you to understand what Thomas understood. What your brother died trying to make you see." She placed a second document beside the first. "Your brother's original proposal. The one you dismissed without reading. His vision was remarkable integrated care, peer support, family counseling. He understood trauma because he lived it." Chase turned away, unwilling to face the evidence of his brother's foresight and his own failure. "The choice is yours," Chen said. "Sign the authorization, commit to genuine involvement, and the board will support your eventual return. Refuse and we'll proceed with permanent removal. Either way, the foundation will be established. The only question is whether you'll be part of Thomas's legacy or remain its greatest obstacle." She walked to the door, then paused. "You once told the board that Chase Global would define Boston's future. This is your chance to decide what that definition will be." After Chen left, Chase stood motionless, staring at the documents on his counter. Thomas's proposal lay open, his brother's handwriting filling the margins with notes and ideas. Reading it now would mean acknowledging how thoroughly he had failed his brother. Not reading it would confirm he was exactly the man Davidson believed him to be. With trembling hands, Chase picked up the proposal and began to read. Wolf's meeting with Margaret Chen took place not in the gleaming Chase Global Tower, but in a small conference room at the Boston Veterans Medical Center. Hannah had arranged it, insisting that if Chen wanted to understand the issue, she should see the front lines. Chen arrived precisely on time, accompanied only by James Peterson. No lawyers, no PR team. Her simple gesture of meeting on Wolf's territory spoke volumes. Hannah joined them, bringing case files with personal details redacted, showing the impact of funding cuts on veterans' treatment options. The stories told a damning pattern: programs eliminated treatments, denied lives lost. These aren't statistics, Hannah explained, her professional demeanor masking the passion beneath. These are people who served their country only to be abandoned when they needed help most. Chen reviewed the files with focused attention. These funding cuts, some came directly from Chase Global's subsidiary decisions. Many did, Hannah confirmed, including the decision to acquire this building for redevelopment. Chen looked up sharply. This building is slated for redevelopment. Peterson nodded uncomfortably. Phase 3 of the Harbor Point project. The medical center would be relocated to a smaller facility outside the city. Where many veterans couldn't access it, Hannah added, transportation is already a barrier to care for those with limited resources. Chen made a note in her small leather notebook. This stops immediately. Consider the acquisition canceled. Wolf watched this exchange with measured hope. Chen seemed genuinely disturbed by what she was learning, not just as a PR problem, but as a moral failing. Mr. Davidson, Chen said, turning to Wolf, I've spoken with Alexander. The board is prepared to implement your suggestions with modifications. What modifications? Wolf asked cautiously. The funding will be significantly higher than you proposed. 100 million over 5 years, not 50. The Thomas Chase Memorial Center will be established here with expansion rather than reduction of services. And Alexander himself will be involved, though the nature of that involvement remains to be determined. Wolf considered this. And Alexander himself, does he understand what's at stake? Chen met his gaze directly. He's beginning to. I gave him Thomas's original proposal to read. Whether it penetrates years of willful blindness remains to be seen. It's not about punishing Chase, Wolf clarified. It's about ensuring this doesn't happen again. Not here, not anywhere. On that we agree, Chen replied. Which brings me to my next point. The story has grown beyond Boston. National veterans organizations are calling for investigations into similar situations nationwide. Your actions have sparked something larger than one company's policies. Wolf nodded soberly. This was always the risk of Operation Thunderclap. Like dropping a stone in still water, you couldn't control how far the ripples spread. What would you have us do? Chen asked, and the question was genuine. Lead it, Wolf answered simply. Don't wait for public pressure to force each concession. Get ahead of it. Make Chase Global the standard others must meet. Honor Thomas's vision completely, not just as damage control, but as corporate mission. Peterson nodded approvingly. Chen made more notes in her book. There's one more thing, Chen said. Alexander has requested to meet with you, privately. Wolf raised an eyebrow. For what purpose? He didn't specify, Chen admitted, but I believe it's important for him and possibly for resolution. Wolf considered the request. Meeting Chase now carried risks. It could be perceived as negotiation compromise, even capitulation. The Iron Patriots and the wider veteran community were watching his every move. But leadership sometimes required walking difficult paths. Wolf had never shied from those in combat. He wouldn't start now. Tell him I'll meet him, Wolf decided. Not at his office, not at our clubhouse, neutral ground. Where? Chen asked. Wolf knew exactly where the meeting needed to happen. Arlington National Cemetery, Section 60, tomorrow at noon. Chen understood immediately. Section 60, where many from Iraq and Afghanistan were laid to rest, including possibly Thomas Chase. I'll convey your terms, she said, rising to leave. Thank you for your willingness to engage constructively, Mr. Davidson. It confirms what many already believed about your character. After Chen and Peterson departed, Hannah turned to her father. Arlington, are you sure? Wolf nodded. Some conversations can only happen in the right context. Chase needs to understand this isn't about him or me, it's about them. He gestured to the case files spread across the table. All of them. The Iron Patriots clubhouse had transformed into an impromptu command center. Veterans organizations from across the country had made contact, sharing similar stories of facilities, closed treatments, denied development, prioritized over care. What had begun as one confrontation in a Boston restaurant was catalyzing a national conversation. Rex coordinated information flow, his background in military intelligence serving him well. Giant maps on the walls tracked facilities under threat nationwide. Computers displayed real-time social media activity. Volunteers managed phone lines connecting veterans needing immediate assistance with available resources. It's bigger than we anticipated, Rex told Wolf as they surveyed the operation. Veterans who've been suffering in silence for years are speaking up. Media outlets that normally ignore these issues are covering them front page. Wolf watched as Poet the Iron Patriot, with a gift for words, coached a young Marine veteran through his upcoming television interview. Tank and Hammer sorted donations of food and supplies that had begun arriving from supportive local businesses. Scalpel, with his medical background, consulted on cases needing immediate intervention. "How are we handling the Chase situation with the members?" Wolf asked. Rex grimaced. "Mixed reactions. Most support your approach. Some want more direct action. There's a faction arguing we should push for criminal charges for assault." "That would defeat the purpose," Wolf said firmly. "This isn't about revenge. It's about fixing a broken system." "I know that," Rex replied, "but emotion runs hot, especially with the younger vets. They see Chase as the perfect villain. Rich, powerful, uncaring. Taking him down completely feels righteous." Wolf understood the sentiment. The younger veterans had returned to a different America than he had known after Desert Storm. More divided, more cynical. Trust in institutions had eroded. The wealthy seemed increasingly insulated from consequences. "Gather everyone," Wolf decided. "They need to understand what we're doing and why." 20 minutes later, the main floor of the clubhouse fell silent as Wolf addressed the assembled veterans. Iron Patriots in their cuts stood alongside visitors from other clubs and organizations. Combat veterans from Korea to Afghanistan, united by common experience, despite the decades separating their service. "I know many of you want Alexander Chase's head on a pike." Wolf began drawing knowing chuckles. "I understand that impulse. When he threw that coffee, my first instinct was something the Geneva Convention frowns upon." More laughter, tension easing slightly. "But we're better than our first instincts." Wolf continued, his voice growing serious. "We're better than the stereotypes. We're better than petty vengeance." He pointed to the maps on the walls. "Look at what's happening. Because we chose justice over revenge, veterans nationwide are finding their voices. Policies are being questioned. Changes are beginning." Wolf moved through the crowd, making eye contact with as many as possible. "If we had responded with violence, the story would be about biker thugs assaulting a prominent businessman. By responding with discipline and dignity, we changed the narrative. Now it's about the systematic neglect of those who served." An older veteran, Vietnam era, judging by his faded Marine Corps cap, spoke up. "So Chase just walks away after what he did to his own brother, after what happened to Miller?" Wolf shook his head. "No one's walking away. Chase Global is establishing a $100 million foundation. Veterans' facilities will be preserved and expanded. And Alexander Chase himself will face the consequences of his actions, not through public humiliation or criminal charges, but through understanding." "You believe he can change?" someone else asked skeptically. "I believe in the possibility," Wolf replied honestly. "I've seen harder men than Alexander Chase transform when finally confronted with truth. And if he doesn't change, the systems around him will. The board is committed. The public is watching. The days of quietly sacrificing veterans' needs for corporate profit are ending." He looked around the room, seeing the mixture of hope and skepticism on weathered faces. "Tomorrow I'm meeting Chase at Arlington, Section 60. Not to make peace, but to make sure he understands the true cost of the decisions he and others like him have made." Tank's deep voice rumbled from the back. "You shouldn't go alone, boss." Wolf smiled slightly. "I won't be alone. I'll be surrounded by 20,000 of our brothers and sisters who made the ultimate sacrifice." He paused. "But I'll take 2 of you with me, Rex and 1 other. The rest need to continue what we've started here." The meeting continued. Strategies discussed, tasks assigned. Throughout, Wolf observed the transformation happening before his eyes. Veterans who had arrived angry and bitter were finding purpose in constructive action. Men and women who had felt powerless were discovering their collective voice. This was the true success of Operation Thunderclap, not humiliating one wealthy man, but awakening a community to its own strength. Later, as the clubhouse quieted, Wolf sat alone in his office reviewing Thomas Chase's service record. Margaret Chen had provided it along with the official report of his death. The similarities between Thomas and Miller were striking, both idealistic, both broken by war, both denied the help they sought. Wolf's phone buzzed with a text from Hannah. "CNN interview went well. They're calling it a watershed moment for veterans advocacy. You've started something important, Dad." Wolf set down his phone and looked at the photograph of Thomas Chase and Miller brothers in arms in the desert sun. Tomorrow he would face Thomas's brother across the graves of the fallen. The conversation would not be easy for either of them. But easy conversations rarely change the world. Hard truths spoken in the right place at the right time sometimes did. The morning dawned clear over Washington, D.C., unseasonably warm for October. Wolf stood at attention before an endless sea of white marble headstones, each marking a life given in service. Section 60 of Arlington National Cemetery contained the most recent casualties, Iraq-Afghanistan, the continuing cost of America's longest wars. Rex stood several paces behind, giving Wolf space while maintaining watchful presence. They had arrived an hour early, allowing Wolf time for private reflection. He walked slowly among the headstones, reading names, noting dates. So many young lives, so much potential lost. He found Thomas Chase's grave easily. Chen had provided the location. The simple white marker bore the essential information: name, rank, dates of birth and death, military branch. Nothing about how he died or why. Nothing about the demons that had followed him home from war. Wolf knelt and brushed invisible dust from the stone, a gesture of respect, soldier to soldier. "We're trying to make it right, Lieutenant," he said quietly. "For you, for Miller, for all of them." At precisely noon, a black Lincoln town car pulled up to the nearest access road. Alexander Chase emerged alone, wearing not his usual bespoke suit, but simple dark slacks and a navy blazer. Appropriate attire for a cemetery. He had given this some thought. Wolf watched Chase approach, noting how different the man appeared from their encounter at Azure. The arrogant confidence was gone, replaced by something more tentative. His shoulders slumped slightly, his steps measured and uncertain. Chase stopped several paces away, seemingly unsure of protocol. "Mr. Davidson," he said finally, "thank you for agreeing to meet." Wolf nodded once but said nothing. This was Chase's meeting. Let him find his way. Chase's eyes moved to the headstone. "I haven't been here since the funeral, 17 years. The admission carried unmistakable shame. Wolf remained silent, allowing the weight of that statement to settle between them. "I read Thomas's proposal," Chase continued, "the one he tried to show me before." He couldn't finish the sentence. "It was visionary. He understood trauma in ways I never tried to." "He lived it," Wolf said simply. "Yes." Chase looked around at the sea of headstones. "They all did. And his voice broke. "I built luxury condos while they suffered." Wolf studied the man before him. The veneer of privilege had cracked, revealing something raw beneath. Not performance, not calculation. Genuine recognition of failure. "I didn't come here to apologize," Chase said unexpectedly. "Not because I don't owe you one, I do, but because words are cheap. Anyone can say they're sorry when caught. I came to show you this." He handed Wolf a document bearing the Chase Global letterhead. Wolf recognized it immediately, the foundation authorization Chen had mentioned. But Chase had modified it, expanding the scope, the funding, the commitment. $200 million, Chase explained. "Not over 5 years, immediately. The Thomas Chase Memorial Center will be the most comprehensive PTSD treatment facility in the country. And this," he pointed to a paragraph Wolf hadn't noticed initially. "Chase Global is transferring ownership of 15 properties currently serving veterans into a nonprofit trust. They can never be developed, never be sold. They belong to the veteran community permanently." Wolf scanned the document carefully, looking for loopholes, escape clauses, PR language. He found none. "Why?" Wolf asked simply. Chase looked at his brother's headstone. "Because Thomas was right and I was wrong. For 17 years I've been wrong." He knelt beside the grave, mirroring Wolf's earlier gesture. "I told myself his death was the war's fault, the military's fault, anyone's fault but mine. I buried the truth deeper than they buried him." Wolf watched as Chase placed a hand on the cold marble. "The night he died, he came to my office. He had this proposal, the same one I finally read yesterday. He begged me to help fund it, said it would save lives, said he couldn't sleep for the nightmares, couldn't escape the memories." Chase's voice faltered. "I told him to man up, to stop dwelling in the past. I said if he'd chosen business instead of playing soldier, he wouldn't have these problems." The raw admission hung in the cemetery air. "He left my office without another word," Chase continued. "That night he put his service pistol in his mouth. The note he left," Chase closed his eyes, the memory physically painful. "The note said Alex was right. I can't escape the past, but maybe this way I can escape the future." Wolf felt the weight of those words, so similar to Miller's last thoughts. The same despair, the same finality. "I buried that truth," Chase said. "Buried it under work, under wealth, under ego. Convinced myself his weakness caused his death, not my callousness." He looked up at Wolf. until you forced me to see it again. Wolf considered the man kneeling at his brother's grave. The transformation seemed genuine, but one moment of clarity didn't erase years of harmful decisions. How do I know this isn't just reputation management? Wolf asked directly. Chase nodded, expecting the question. You don't. Not from words alone. He stood brushing cemetery grass from his knees. That's why I've resigned as CEO of Chase Global. Permanently. This surprised Wolf. The board forced you out. No, Chase replied. They were prepared to reinstate me after a leave of absence. This was my decision. I'm keeping my ownership stake, but transferring voting control to the foundation trustees. My wealth will continue supporting veterans' causes, but my direct power over those decisions ends. Wolf studied Chase carefully. And what will you do? Work at the foundation, Chase answered. Not as its head, I'm not qualified, but in whatever capacity helps most. I need to understand what Thomas understood, what you understand, what I've spent years avoiding. The sincerity in Chase's voice was unmistakable. Wolf had interrogated enough men in combat zones to recognize truth from fiction. Chase wasn't performing contrition, he was experiencing genuine transformation. It won't be easy, Wolf warned. The veteran community has long memories. Trust is earned slowly. I know, Chase acknowledged. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But I can change what my name means to veterans going forward. Not for my sake, but for Thomas's. For Miller's. For all of them. He gestured to the surrounding graves. Wolf made his decision. He extended his hand. Then we have work to do, Mr. Chase. Chase took his hand, the handshake, sealing not friendship, but a tentative alliance in service of something greater than either man. As they walked back toward the cemetery entrance, Chase asked the Iron Patriots, will they accept this outcome? I know many wanted more direct consequences. Wolf smiled slightly. Warriors understand mission objectives better than most civilians. Our objective was never your destruction. It was justice for veterans. If this foundation delivers, that they'll support it. And if I fail to honor these commitments, Chase asked. Wolf's smile faded. Then Operation Thunderclap would seem mild by comparison. They reached the road where both their vehicles waited. Rex stood at parade rest beside Wolf's motorcycle, watching the exchange with cautious optimism. There's one more thing, Chase said, reaching into his jacket. He withdrew an envelope and handed it to Wolf. Thomas kept a journal during Desert Storm. I found it yesterday while going through his things for the first time since his death. There's an entry about you. Wolf looked at the envelope with surprise. Me, I don't recall meeting your brother. You wouldn't, Chase explained. It was brief, but according to his journal, you pulled him from a burning vehicle after an IED strike. He was unconscious. You wouldn't have known his name. Wolf had pulled many men from danger during his service. One more face among hundreds. But to that one man, the act had been everything. I thought you should have this, Chase said, to know that long before our paths crossed at Azure, they had already intersected in the desert. Wolf accepted the envelope with solemn reverence. The cosmic coincidence, or perhaps justice of the situation, wasn't lost on him. Decades ago, he had saved Thomas Chase's life only for Thomas to lose it later to demons Wolf understood all too well. Now Wolf had inadvertently set in motion events that might redeem Thomas's brother and help countless veterans. The warrior's path was rarely straight, but sometimes if you followed it long enough, it brought you exactly where you needed to be. As Chase departed in his town car, Wolf turned to Rex. What do you think? Rex considered the question carefully. I think Thomas Chase would approve. Wolf nodded, tucking the envelope securely inside his leather cut next to his heart. So do I, brother. So do I. They mounted their motorcycles and rode away from Arlington, leaving Thomas Chase at rest among his brothers and sisters in arms. But they carried something new with them, not just the promise of help for veterans long neglected, but the reminder that even the most unlikely hearts could change when confronted with undeniable truth. The Iron Patriots had won their most important victory without throwing a single punch. Not through force, but through the power of brotherhood, honor, and unwavering commitment to those who had served. The battle wasn't over. It never truly would be. But today, on this hallowed ground, an important front had been secured. And somewhere Wolf believed Thomas Chase and Sergeant Miller knew it too. 1 year after the confrontation at Azure, Boston's skyline remained largely unchanged. The Chase Global Tower still dominated the financial district, its glass facade reflecting clouds and sunlight. But within that familiar exterior, profound transformations had occurred, rippling outward through the city and beyond. Where construction crews once prepared to demolish the Boston Veterans Medical Center, For luxury condominiums, architects and builders now work feverishly to expand the facility. A banner stretched across the scaffolding, future home of the Thomas Chase Memorial Center for PTSD Research and Treatment. Inside the center's temporary administrative offices, Marcus Wolf Davidson studied the blueprints spread across his desk, his weathered fingers tracing the outlines of what would become the nation's most advanced combat trauma treatment facility. At 66, Wolf remained imposing, his military bearing undiminished by age. His legendary leather cut hung on a nearby coat rack, the coffee stain from that fateful night preserved like a battle scar. A light knock interrupted his concentration. Hannah stood in the doorway, her white coat emblazoned with the newly designed Thomas Chase Center logo. "The board approved the final plans," she said, entering with a stack of folders. "Groundbreaking for the West Wing expansion starts next week." Wolf nodded with quiet satisfaction. His daughter had transformed from promising researcher to national authority on PTSD treatment in a single year. The incident at Azure, traumatic as it had been, had catapulted her work into the spotlight and secured funding that once seemed impossible. "Your mother would be proud," Wolf said softly. Hannah's expression softened. "Of both of us." Their moment was interrupted by the arrival of James Peterson, the Chase Global Board member, an Iraq veteran who had first approached Wolf after the Azure incident. Once a corporate messenger, Peterson had become the foundation's operational director, bridging the worlds of business and veteran advocacy. "Sorry to interrupt," Peterson said, "but the Secretary of Veterans Affairs just confirmed for the dedication ceremony. National press will cover it." Hannah raised an eyebrow. "Cabinet-level attendance? That's unexpected." "Not really," Peterson replied. "The Thomas Chase protocol is being implemented at VA hospitals nationwide. Your research is changing the standard of care." Wolf watched this exchange with a mixture of pride and bewilderment. A year ago, the Iron Patriots had operated on the fringes, helping veterans the system overlooked. Now they were reshaping the system itself. The change had come at great cost: Miller's suicide. Thomas's legacy finally recognized Alexander Chase's public fall and private redemption, but the impact was undeniable. "There's something else," Peterson added, his tone shifting. "We have a situation at the Cambridge facility." Wolf straightened, instantly alert. "What kind of situation?" "Victory Force showed up this morning, about 20 of them." Wolf and Hannah exchanged concerned glances. Victory Force was a splinter group of veterans who had rejected the Foundation's work with Chase Global. Led by a charismatic former Marine named Rayburn, they viewed any collaboration with Alexander Chase as betrayal. "They're protesting the opening," Hannah asked. Peterson nodded. "Rayburn's calling it blood money. Says Chase is using veterans to rehabilitate his image without real change." Wolf considered this development. He'd known not every veteran would accept Chase's transformation. The wounds ran too deep, the distrust of wealth and power too ingrained. Rayburn had approached Wolf months ago, trying to convince him to reject Chase's involvement completely. When Wolf refused, Rayburn had broken away, taking some younger veterans with him. "We can't ignore them," Wolf decided. "They fought for the right to protest. I'll go speak with Rayburn myself." "I don't think that's wise," Peterson cautioned. "The press would have a field day with any confrontation between you two." "It won't be a confrontation," Wolf assured him. "It'll be a conversation between brothers who disagree." Hannah touched her father's arm. "Dad, Rayburn isn't like you. He doesn't believe in your methods." Wolf smiled slightly. "Neither did Chase once upon a time." Before Hannah could respond, Wolf's phone rang. The screen displayed a name he hadn't expected: Alexander Chase. The Cambridge facility of the Thomas Chase Foundation occupied a former community college building. Its brick facade now adorned with banners announcing the veteran-focused programs inside. In the parking lot, 20 men and women in military-style clothing carried signs: "No blood money. Chase profits from veteran suffering. Wolf in bed with the enemy." Alexander Chase observed this scene from his car parked discreetly across the street. At 64, he had aged visibly in the past year. The perfectly tailored suits and immaculate appearance had given way to more casual attire and slightly longer hair. The arrogance that once defined him had been replaced by something quieter, more reflective. Chase hadn't planned to visit the Cambridge facility today. His schedule included meetings with architects for the Seattle Center and a conference call with Pentagon officials about pre-discharge mental health screening initiatives. But something had drawn him here after learning about the Victory Force protest. His phone rang. Margaret Chen, still chairwoman of Chase Global's board, though Chase himself had stepped down as CEO. Alexander Chen said without preamble, "I'm told you are at the Cambridge facility." "News travels fast," Chase replied. We have a PR team ready to manage the situation. The security detail can escort you through the rear entrance. Chase watched as a tall, muscular man with a bullhorn addressed the protesters. Rayburn, presumably. The man's animated gestures and the nodding heads of his followers told a clear story. Righteous anger, conviction, a sense of betrayal. That won't be necessary, Chase decided. I'm not going inside. Alexander. Margaret, I've learned something this year. Sometimes the hardest conversations need to happen face to face. No security, no PR team, no corporate shield. Chen's silence conveyed her disapproval. This isn't like Azure. These are veterans who explicitly reject your involvement with the Foundation. They won't be impressed by grand gestures. I'm not looking to impress anyone, Chase said. I'm just trying to understand. He ended the call and stared across the street, considering his next move. A text message appeared on his screen. Wolf Davidson. Stay where you are, I'm 10 minutes out. Chase smiled slightly. Of course Wolf would know he was here. The Iron Patriots intelligence network remained formidable. He settled back to wait, watching the protest unfold with a strange sense of déjà vu. A year ago, he had watched with similar detachment as bikers surrounded Azure Restaurant. The roles had reversed, yet the fundamental drama remained: those with power confronted by those who felt powerless. Exactly 9 minutes later, the distinctive rumble of Harley-Davidson motorcycles filled the air. 3 bikes rounded the corner, Wolf in the lead, flanked by Rex and Tank. They parked directly in front of the protesters, creating an immediate shift in the group's attention. Chase watched, fascinated, as Wolf dismounted and approached Rayburn. No hostility, no defensive posture. Just 2 veterans acknowledging each other with the unspoken recognition of shared service. He couldn't hear their conversation, but the body language told the story. Rayburn gesturing forcefully, Wolf listening calmly. The other protesters gathering around, some confrontational, others respectful. Wolf introducing Rex and Tank veterans, whose sacrifices were beyond question. After several minutes, Wolf seemed to make a proposition. Rayburn considered it, consulted with his lieutenants, then nodded reluctantly. Wolf extended his hand. After a moment's hesitation, Rayburn shook it. Wolf turned and scanned the street until his eyes locked on Chase's car. He beckoned with a slight nod. Chase took a deep breath, stepped out of his vehicle, and crossed the street. The conference room inside the Cambridge facility felt too small for the tension it contained. Wolf sat at the head of the table with Chase to his right and Rayburn to his left, symbolic positioning that escaped no one. Rex and Tank stood by the door, not as security, but as witnesses. 5 of Rayburn's core group completed the gathering. I appreciate everyone agreeing to this conversation. Wolf began, his calm voice filling the silence. We all want the same thing: to help veterans get the care they've earned. We just disagree about methods. Rayburn, a hard-faced man in his 40s with a Desert Storm veteran's cap, leaned forward. With respect, Wolf, this isn't about methods, it's about principles. You can't sleep with the enemy and claim you're still fighting the war. Chase winced visibly but remained silent. The enemy was never Chase, Wolf replied evenly. The enemy was a system that failed Thomas Chase, failed Miller, failed thousands of others. Alexander was part of that system. Now he's part of changing it. Convenient redemption story, one of Rayburn's supporters muttered. Wolf turned his attention to the young woman who had spoken, early 30s Afghanistan veteran, by her unit patch. What's your name, sister? Martinez, Army, 2010 to 2016. 2 tours in Kandahar. Wolf nodded respect. Martinez, I understand your skepticism. I shared it. But let me ask you this: if we rejected every ally who once misunderstood our struggle, who would be left to help us? There's a difference between misunderstanding and actively harming, Martinez countered. Chase Global bought veteran housing to build condos, denied funding to PTSD programs. Mr. Chase himself assaulted you in public. All true, Wolf acknowledged, and all addressed through actions, not just words. He turned to Chase. Alexander, would you explain what happened with the property acquisitions? Chase cleared his throat, meeting the suspicious gazes directly. Every property Chase Global acquired that was serving veterans has been transferred to the Foundation Trust. Not leased, not loaned, transferred. They can never be developed, never be sold. The legal work was completed 6 months ago. Paper promises, Rayburn scoffed. Legally binding commitments, Chase corrected. I no longer have any control over those properties. The trust is managed by a board that includes Wolf Hannah Davidson, 3 other veterans, and 2 medical professionals specializing in combat trauma. I have no vote, no veto, no authority. Wolf nodded. The foundation now controls facilities in 12 cities, with expansion planned for another 8. More importantly, the Thomas Chase protocol for PTSD treatment is being implemented at VA hospitals nationwide. Named after his brother, Rayburn pointed out, keeping the Chase name front and center. Named after a veteran who died by suicide after being denied care, Wolf corrected firmly. Thomas Chase served with honor in Desert Storm. He developed PTSD. He created an innovative treatment approach that his brother rejected. Now that approach is saving lives. His name deserves to be remembered. A heavy silence fell over the room. Even Rayburn seemed to have no immediate response. Chase spoke into the quiet. I understand why you don't trust me. I wouldn't trust me either in your position. But this isn't about me. It's about Thomas's vision finally being realized. It's about Miller not having died in vain. It's about making sure no other veteran faces what they faced. Rayburn studied Chase with narrowed eyes. Pretty words. What happens when the spotlight fades? When this isn't headline news anymore? When your reputation is sufficiently rehabilitated? I resigned as CEO permanently, Chase replied. My voting shares are in an irrevocable trust. The foundation's funding is guaranteed for 30 years regardless of what happens to me or Chase Global. I can't back out. I can't change course. The commitment outlives me. Wolf watched Rayburn processing this information. The younger veteran was stubborn but not unreasonable. He had served with distinction in Iraq, returned to find limited opportunities and inadequate care. His anger was justified, even if his targets were sometimes misplaced. Rayburn, Wolf said gently, no one's asking you to trust Chase. Trust me. Trust the Iron Patriots. We've spent decades fighting for veterans. We wouldn't associate with the foundation if it wasn't legitimate. Martinez leaned forward. What about the Cambridge facility specifically? Rumors are it's going to focus on research, not direct care. Veterans need beds and doctors, not studies and papers. Wolf nodded to Chase, who retrieved a folder from his briefcase. The Cambridge facility's final plans, Chase explained, sliding documents across the table. 40 inpatient beds, outpatient capacity for 200, on-site housing for families during treatment, all at no cost to veterans regardless of discharge status or VA eligibility. As Rayburn and his people reviewed the documents, Wolf caught Chase's eye. The businessman gave him a subtle nod, acknowledgement that Wolf had been right to arrange this meeting to confront the opposition directly rather than dismiss it. Why wasn't this public? Rayburn asked, looking up from the plans. It will be next week, Chase replied. We've learned to have everything legally secured before making announcements. The atmosphere in the room had shifted perceptibly. Not warm, certainly not friendly, but the hostility had diminished. I'm not saying we're convinced, Rayburn said finally, but we'll stand down at Cambridge while we verify all this. Wolf extended his hand. Fair enough. All I ask is that you judge based on actions, not assumptions. After the meeting concluded and Rayburn's group departed, Chase sat heavily in his chair. That was educational. Wolf smiled slightly. Welcome to the real work. Fancy galas and press conferences are the easy part. Convincing the people who've been burned before, that's the challenge. Chase nodded thoughtfully. Rayburn reminds me of Thomas. The intensity, the idealism beneath the anger. I thought the same thing, Wolf admitted, which is why we need to take his concerns seriously. He represents veterans who have every reason to be suspicious. He paused. The dedication ceremony for the Boston Center is in 3 weeks. We should invite Rayburn's group. Let them see everything, ask any questions. Complete transparency. Chase raised an eyebrow. That's a significant security risk. No greater than letting you walk across the street to meet them today, Wolf countered with a hint of amusement. Sometimes the greatest security comes from having nothing to hide. The night before the Thomas Chase Memorial Center dedication ceremony, Wolf stood alone in the completed memorial garden. Moonlight illuminated the bronze statue at its center, a combat medic tending to a wounded soldier. Though not explicit portraits, the figures evoked both Thomas Chase and Sergeant Miller. Around the statue, plaques told the stories of veterans lost to PTSD. Benches offered spaces for reflection. The garden's design balanced military precision with natural tranquility, ordered pathways through wildflowers and native grasses. Wolf approached a glass display case containing 2 items of profound significance. Thomas Chase's original treatment protocol, handwritten in a field notebook during Desert Storm, and Sergeant Miller's last letter. Together they told the story of 2 men separated by time, but united by common struggles. Thomas had recognized the problem and conceived a solution. Miller had paid the ultimate price when that solution remained unimplemented. I hoped I'd find you here. Wolf turned to see Hannah approaching along the garden path. The moonlight caught the silver caduceus pendant at her throat, Caroline's gift, connecting her to Thomas Chase's legacy in a personal way. Just making sure everything's perfect for tomorrow, Wolf explained. Hannah smiled knowingly. Dad, you've checked every detail 10 times. This is something else. Wolf nodded, conceding the point. I was thinking about how we got here. The strange path that led from that night at Azure to this. He gestured to the center rising behind them, its windows illuminated against the night sky. One moment of cruelty leading to so much good. Not the moment itself, Hannah corrected gently. How you responded to it. If you had reacted with violence, none of this would exist. Wolf considered this. The Iron Patriots were never about violence. The public just assumed we were because of how we looked what we rode. And now they know better, Hannah said, linking her arm through his. The world finally sees what I always saw: men of honor who found brotherhood after war, who protect those society overlooks. They walked together through the garden, father and daughter, past the memorial plaques and flowering plants. In one corner stood a small but significant addition, a section dedicated to the Korean War, centered around Master Sergeant Holloway's Combat Infantryman badge, displayed in a special case. The elderly veteran had passed away 2 months earlier, but his contribution would be honored tomorrow during the ceremony. Michael thinks we should expand the family wing, Hannah said, changing the subject. The waiting list already exceeds capacity. Wolf nodded. His son-in-law had proven himself an extraordinary advocate for veterans' families, developing programs that recognize trauma's impact beyond the individual service member. We'll find the space, Wolf assured her. Chase mentioned additional property adjacent to the east parking lot. They reached the garden's exit where the main center building rose before them. Tomorrow, hundreds would gather for the official dedication. Tonight, it stood as a testament to promises fulfilled, vision, realized, justice served in unexpected ways. You should get some rest, Wolf told his daughter. Tomorrow will be a long day. Hannah kissed his cheek. You too, Dad. The Iron Patriots need their leader at full strength. After she departed, Wolf remained a moment longer, looking back at the garden in moonlight. Thomas Chase and Sergeant Miller had not died in vain. Their stories, their struggles, their sacrifices had led to something meaningful. Not through violence or vengeance, but through the steady application of truth revealed and justice served. Wolf touched the coffee stain on his leather cut, preserved as both reminder and lesson. We're getting it right, brothers, he said softly to the night air. Finally getting it right. Dedication day dawned clear and bright. By 9 o'clock, crowds had begun gathering outside the Thomas Chase Memorial Center. Veterans of every generation from Korea to Afghanistan, medical professionals, politicians, media, families of those lost to combat trauma. The Iron Patriots arrived in formation, 50 motorcycles in perfect lines, their riders in formal cuts over dress shirts. They took positions as an honor guard near the entrance, where a podium and seating area had been arranged for the ceremony. Wolf stood slightly apart, observing the gathering crowd. Rex approached his prosthetic leg, moving with practiced precision beneath dress pants. Rayburn's group is here, Rex reported, 15 of them, armed with questions, not protests. Wolf nodded approval. Make sure they have front row seats and complete access after the ceremony. Already arranged, Rex confirmed, and the secretary's motorcade just cleared security at the perimeter, ETA 5 minutes. As if on cue, Hannah emerged from the center to join them. She wore a professional blue dress, reminiscent of the one from Azure, now paired with Thomas Chase's fiancée's caduceus pendant. Ready? She asked her father. As I'll ever be, Wolf replied. Public speaking had never been his strength, but today's ceremony required his participation. Alexander Chase arrived last, accompanied by Margaret Chen. He moved through the crowd with a different presence than the arrogant CEO who had once thrown coffee in Wolf's face. He greeted veterans by name, shook hands without pretension, listened more than he spoke. When he reached Wolf, and Hannah, Chase seemed uncharacteristically nervous. I've been thinking about what to say. Nothing seems adequate. Speak from experience, Wolf advised. Tell them what you've learned. The secretary's motorcade arrived, adding cabinet-level gravitas to the proceedings. The ceremony began with military precision, color guard national anthem invocation by a veteran chaplain. Hannah, as medical director, welcomed everyone and introduced the distinguished guests. Before we proceed with the formal dedication, Hannah said, I'd like to acknowledge 2 people whose presence made today possible, though they cannot be with us physically. She gestured to a section of the audience where a middle-aged woman sat with 2 teenagers. Mrs. Miller and her children Sergeant Miller's sacrifice became a catalyst for change. The crowd applauded respectfully as Mrs. Miller acknowledged the recognition with quiet dignity. And Caroline Bennett, Hannah continued, touching the caduceus at her throat. Thomas Chase's fiancée who kept his vision alive when others forgot. An elegant woman in her 50s nodded slightly, her eyes bright with unshed tears. Various dignitaries spoke briefly, the secretary, the governor, medical authorities. When Alexander Chase was introduced, a murmur ran through the audience. Despite a year of demonstrated commitment, public opinion remained divided on his personal redemption. Chase approached the podium without notes. He surveyed the crowd, his gaze lingering on Rayburn's group, then on Mrs. Miller, then on Caroline Bennett. I stand before you not as a CEO, not as a philanthropist, but as a brother who failed when it mattered most. He began, his voice steady despite the emotion evident in his face. Thomas Chase returned from Desert Storm carrying invisible wounds. He developed a groundbreaking approach to treating those wounds. He came to me for help implementing it. Chase paused. I refused, not because his ideas lacked merit, but because they interfered with my concept of success. The crowd was utterly silent. Thomas took his own life that night, Chase continued. For 16 years, I buried that truth beneath work and wealth and rationalization, until Marcus Davidson forced me to see it. Chase gestured to Wolf. Not through violence, though I certainly provoked it, not through public humiliation, though I deserved it, but through something more powerful, the example of honor, discipline, and brotherhood that I had forgotten existed in this world. His voice gained strength as he continued. This center bears Thomas's name because it embodies his vision. The protocols used here and now at VA facilities nationwide originated in his field notes from Desert Storm. The approaches to family support, peer counseling, and reintegration all began in the mind of a young lieutenant who understood trauma because he lived it. Chase looked directly at Rayburn and his group. Some of you question my involvement, my motives, my commitment. You are right to do so. I have not earned your trust through words and perhaps never will through actions. But this center doesn't depend on me. It will outlive me. The Foundation's funding, properties, and mission are legally secured for decades to come, controlled by those who have proven their dedication to veterans. He drew a deep breath. Thomas wrote in his last letter that he couldn't escape the past. The truth is none of us can, but we can transform it. We can ensure that those who didn't make it home, either from war or its aftermath, did not die in vain. He stepped back from the podium. Thank you for allowing me to be part of that transformation. The applause was not thunderous, but sincere acknowledgement, if not full acceptance. Wolf was introduced next. He approached the podium uncomfortable with formal speaking, but determined to honor the occasion properly. I'm a man of few words, he began, drawing knowing chuckles from the Iron Patriots. So I'll keep this brief. 21 years ago, I founded the Iron Patriots Motorcycle Club because I saw too many brothers and sisters falling through the cracks after service. We did what we could, a ride to a VA appointment, rent money during a tough month, someone to call at 2 a.m. when the nightmares wouldn't stop. He gestured to the impressive facility behind him. This is something different. Something that addresses the root causes, not just the symptoms. Something that changes systems, not just individual lives. Wolf turned slightly to include both the audience and the center in his gaze. The night that set this in motion, a wealthy businessman threw hot coffee in my face and called me an animal. My first instinct was something the Geneva Convention frowns upon. Laughter rippled through the crowd, tension easing. But we're better than our first instincts, Wolf continued, his voice turning serious. Better than stereotypes. Better than petty vengeance. The Iron Patriots have always understood that real power isn't about violence or intimidation. It's about standing together, about honoring commitments, about serving something larger than ourselves. He looked to where Mrs. Miller sat with her children. Sergeant Miller wrote in his final letter that he couldn't find his way home from the war. Too many of our brothers and sisters share that experience. This center exists to help them find that path home. Not alone, but together. Not through quick fixes, but through genuine understanding. Wolf gestured to the memorial garden visible through the windows. In that garden stands a statue of a medic helping a wounded soldier. It represents Thomas Chase and James Miller, but it also represents all of us. Sometimes we're the wounded, sometimes we're the healers. Often, we're both simultaneously. He concluded simply, the Iron Patriots will continue to serve veterans however we can. But now, thanks to Thomas's vision, finally realized we can do more than offer a Band-Aid. We can offer a way home. The ceremony continued with the official ribbon cutting performed jointly by Hannah the Secretary, Carolyn Bennett and Mrs. Miller's symbolic unity of medical expertise, government support, Thomas's legacy, and the families affected by PTSD. As the formal program concluded, guests were invited to tour the facility. Wolf found himself approached by Rayburn, who had observed everything with careful attention. "Impressive," Rayburn acknowledged. "More substantial than I expected." Wolf nodded. "Everything open for inspection. Ask any question, see any document." "I still don't trust Chase," Rayburn admitted. "You don't need to," Wolf replied. "The foundation's structure ensures his intentions matter less than his commitments, which are legally binding. But if it helps, I've watched him closely for a year. The change is genuine." Rayburn considered this. "The Victory Force has resources too. Not like this, but we reach veterans others miss." Wolf recognized the olive branch being extended. "There's room for many approaches. The enemy isn't each other. It's the conditions that keep claiming our brothers and sisters long after they leave the battlefield." They shook hands, not friends yet, perhaps not ever, but allies in a cause larger than personal differences. Across the room, Chase was speaking with Carolyn Bennett for the first time since Thomas's funeral. Wolf couldn't hear their conversation, but their body language told a story of painful reconciliation. Carolyn had been the one to give Thomas's journals to the foundation, ensuring his innovative approaches would finally be implemented. Her forgiveness, if that's what was occurring, would mean more to Chase than public rehabilitation ever could. Hannah approached, slipping her arm through Wolf's. "The secretary wants to discuss national implementation over lunch. His staff is impressed with the center." Wolf smiled slightly. "You handle the secretary. I've got something else to attend to." Hannah followed his gaze to where Mrs. Miller and her children stood somewhat awkwardly amid the circulating dignitaries. "I'll join you in a few minutes," she said, understanding immediately. Wolf crossed the room, Rex and Tank falling in behind him without being asked. The three Iron Patriots approached Mrs. Miller with respectful formality. "Mrs. Miller," Wolf said, extending his hand, "thank you for coming today." She took it firmly. "James would have been skeptical of all this," she admitted, "but he would have come around when he saw the results." "That's why we need your help," Wolf explained, "to make sure the foundation never loses sight of what this is really about. Not buildings or programs or protocols, but people. Veterans like your husband." Her expression showed surprise. "My help," Wolf nodded. "We'd like you to join the Foundation's oversight board, not as a figurehead, but as someone who will hold us accountable, who will remind us of what happens when we fail." Mrs. Miller studied him carefully. "You're serious?" "Completely," Wolf confirmed. "The Iron Patriots have always believed that those who've lost the most have the clearest vision of what needs fixing." She looked at her teenage children, then back at Wolf. "I'm not qualified. I'm not a doctor or a businessman." "You're exactly qualified," Wolf countered gently. "You live the consequences of a broken system. Your perspective is essential." Mrs. Miller straightened slightly. "James always said you were different, that the Iron Patriots understood things others didn't." "We try," Wolf acknowledged. "Sometimes we succeed, sometimes we fail, but we never stop trying." She nodded decisively. "Then yes, I'll serve on your board. And I promise you I won't be easy to satisfy." Wolf smiled. "He wouldn't want it any other way." As evening approached, the crowds diminished. The secretary departed with promises of continued federal support. Medical professionals lingered, exploring the research facilities that would advance understanding of combat trauma. Veterans and their families toured the residential wings, where treatment would occur in supportive community settings. Wolf found a quiet moment alone, standing before the coffee-stained leather cut now preserved in a display case near the center's entrance. A small plaque told the story of that night at Azure, ending with words he had spoken to the Iron Patriots. "Sometimes the best revenge isn't violence. It's letting a man destroy himself while the whole world watches. And sometimes destruction leads to rebirth." Chase appeared beside him, studying the display. "When they proposed including this in the exhibits, I almost objected," he admitted. "Then I realized it needed to be here, as reminder and warning." Wolf nodded, understanding. "Not just of your actions, but of my restraint. Both matter to the story." "Do you think we'll ever move beyond that night?" Chase wondered. "Or will it always define us?" "It doesn't define us," Wolf replied thoughtfully. "It revealed us. You've spent a year proving that the man who threw that coffee isn't who you truly are. I spent decades before that moment building the discipline to respond as I did." "And now," Chase asked. "Now we continue the work," Wolf answered simply. "One day at a time, one veteran at a time." As evening deepened into night, Wolf gathered with the Iron Patriots near their motorcycles. The day had been successful beyond expectations. The center was officially open, the media coverage positive. Even Rayburn's group had departed with grudging respect for what had been accomplished. Beer at the clubhouse, Tank suggested. Seems like an occasion worth celebrating. Wolf smiled. First round's on me. As they prepared to mount their bikes, Chase approached once more. Marcus, he called. A moment. Wolf stepped away from the group. What is it, Alexander? Chase seemed uncharacteristically hesitant. I've been thinking about Thomas's journals, how much they've helped shape the center's approach. Wolf nodded encouragement. There are other journals, Chase continued, from other veterans who didn't make it home either from war or its aftermath. Stories that could inform our work, honor their memory. You want to collect them? Wolf surmised. With permission from families, yes, Chase confirmed. Create an archive. Learn from those we've lost to help those still fighting. Wolf considered the proposal. The Iron Patriots could help with that. We have connections throughout the veteran community. Trust that corporate outreach might lack. A partnership, Chase suggested. Officially, the Foundation and the Iron Patriots working together to gather these stories. Consider it done, Wolf agreed, extending his hand. As they shook on the new initiative, Wolf reflected on the strange journey that had brought them here. From adversaries to reluctant allies to genuine partners. From a moment of humiliation in a restaurant to a nationwide initiative saving lives. From hot coffee thrown in anger to a legacy that would outlive them both. The Iron Patriots mounted their motorcycles' engines, rumbling to life in mechanical harmony. Wolf took his place at the lead, the position he had earned through decades of service and leadership. Where to, boss? Rex asked through their helmet communicators. Wolf considered the question. The long way home, he decided, past the old VA through the combat memorial along the harbor. He wanted to see Boston at night to remember why they had fought so hard for this city's veterans. To honor those who had served it, those who had died for it, those who had struggled to find peace within it. As they rode through the darkness, Wolf felt a profound sense of completion. Thomas Chase's vision had finally become reality. Sergeant Miller's death had ultimately led to life-saving resources for thousands. The Iron Patriots had evolved from a small club helping individual veterans to partners in systemic change. And Wolf himself had transformed as well. From Special Forces operator to motorcycle club founder to foundation board member. From warrior to healer. From defender to builder. The coffee stain remained preserved as reminder and lesson. But around it, something beautiful had grown. Something that would save lives for generations to come. Something worthy of the sacrifice of those who had served. And in the end, that was the truest victory of all.